What's something you witnessed, scary or otherwise, that you still can't explain to this day? In Myrtle Beach, camping near the beach, my grandpop told me to come outside of our camper. When I did, I looked up in the sky to see what looked like a small orange fireball, just darting back and forth through the sky for a minute, and then hovering about. After what felt like a minute of this, the fireball all of a sudden shot out in the direction of the ocean, going what looked like 1,000,000 miles an hour, and then disappeared. I wondered and still do wonder if it was a military flare or something, but I truly don't know. When I was a kid, we moved into a new house. All the bedrooms were upstairs. My sister and I were home with our mom, dad was at work, all three of us were at the bottom of the stairs talking about something when a DVD that was in my room, up the stairs and around the corner, literally flew down the stairs. It didn't roll down the steps or slide down, it flew in the air right past us. Then 10 minutes later, my mom made my sister and I bring our laundry up to our rooms. I was scared shitless. In the very early 90s, I was backpacking through Egypt and spent a good deal of time in Dahab by the sea. Accommodation was very sparse, a double bed in a 10 feet by 12 feet room. One time I woke up in the middle of the night with a guy dressed up in a white Navy uniform complete with medals standing at the end of my bed. I yelled no, go away at him, and he disappeared. This one isn't huge, but it is real, and my husband and I think about it a lot. One time I was at urgent care to get an injury checked out. My husband was with me as he usually is for anything medical. The waiting room when you walk in through the door has a long counter at the front, chairs surrounding a TV to the right, and on the left there a little divot in the wall where more chairs rest in front of a bathroom door. It's a single-person bathroom with no windows and only one door. We were sitting in some of the chairs close to the bathroom door. It was kinda in its own micro hallway, and the only exit from walking out of the bathroom was to walk past my husband and I. After sitting there for a while, a man walks in with his wife through the front door of the waiting room. They don't go to the check-in counter, but rather talk right in front of the door for about 30 seconds, maybe a. I looked at each other confused. He went to look in the bathroom and the man wasn't there. There was no other windows or doors to leave out of. The man was just gone, not a trace. We never did figure out where he went, but we do think about it fairly often. Minute. I didn't hear what they were talking about. The woman nods and leaves through the front door, and the man pauses to look around the room once he's alone. I assume she was dropping him off to get checked out. His eyes meet the door to the bathroom and he walks straight there instead of checking in, going inside and locking the door. My husband and I continue to wait there. 5 minutes pass, 10, 15, 20. We waited there for a long time and he never came out. However, I think we've all had times where we spent a good hour in a bathroom, so we just assumed maybe he had a stomach bug. Later, a woman from the waiting room goes up to the bathroom door to use it after the man had been in there for about 30 minutes. She opens the door, no problems. The lock suddenly wasn't engaged. And she goes in to use the restroom, coming out a few minutes later and going back to her seat. My husband and worked at a tanning salon when I was a teen. It was in the basement of an old 70s apartment building. Since the very first day I worked there, weird stuff would occasionally happen. Faucets in the bathroom starting on their own, customers would say we knocked on their door or shouted their names while they tanned. Some customers were long-time clients and had all sorts of stories about it being haunted. Like most salons, we had cameras that monitored the hallways, front, and the computer system told me which beds were in use /clean/dirty. So I'm alone one day, and I walk to clean a bed in the back hallway. It's a long hallway with rooms on each side that ended with a door to the laundry room. As I walked into room 6, right next to the laundry room, I took note that the laundry was done. The laundry room door was open with the light on and I could see/hear the dryer stopped. Now I'm in the room cleaning the bed when suddenly I hear a door slam so loudly. I jump, thinking it's a tanner or something, even though the door definitely didn't buzz. No, it's the laundry room door. It's closed and the light is off. But here's the thing. You cannot, in absolutely no way, slam that door. The floor in the laundry room is all warped by the door and it drags and sticks to the ground. You have to pull it really hard to get it to close. I stood there for about 5 minutes trying with all my might to slam that door and recreate what just happened. Not happening. That's when I totally freaked out and ran to the front and refused to go back there again all night. My parents tell this story about me as a child that scared them. Apparently I woke up very early one morning from a nightmare, crying and screaming. When they came to comfort me and ask me what was wrong, I kept telling them about a plane crash, and that everyone is burning and falling. They put me back to sleep and went back to bed themselves, but when they did get up and put the news on, the 11th of September had happened and was all over the TV. They just looked at each other and freaked out because it was exactly what I had dreamt the night before. I, of course, don't remember anything. I was 4 years old when 9/11 happened and I've never had anything like it happen to me since. I was taking a walk in the woods by my old house in the summer of 2020 and thinking of my grandpa. All of a sudden I heard his favorite song playing. No one was around. Still gives me chills. There was a running joke in my friend group that one of my friends was secretly Canadian, much to his annoyance. One day, he decided to stop by a Japanese supermarket with some of them. As soon as he steps through the door, for some reason, Chris Benoit's, a WWE Canadian wrestler, entrance theme started to play over the loudspeaker. My friends, being wrestling heads, cracked up immediately while my Canadian hung his head in shame. No spooky chills feelings, just silliness. Had some experiences when I was a kid living at my parents' house. Was using the computer late at night in the office room, which had portraits of each family member on the wall behind me. I heard a crash, turn around to see my portrait had fallen. It was the type that had a string on the back, so the frame was hanging on a nail stuck to the wall. The nail was still intact, so I didn't know how the portrait would have suddenly fallen. And of course, of all portraits to fall in that way, it had to be mine. Laying in bed, I would sometimes hear breathing near me. I thought I was hearing my own breathing, so would stop momentarily, and still hear the same breathing. This led to a habit of sleeping with a radio/TV on to drown out the sound. When my family moved out of that house, I never experienced anything similar, so whatever it was, I guess it decided to stay smile. Because 1. Her age, and 2. She would have had to run across the street and down and then cross it again to come back towards us. Then I thought maybe it's a twin, but her pant leg and shoes and scarf that all stood out to me was the exact same. The pant leg was the main stick out for me. So I still have no idea what that was, a glitch in the matrix, an angel. I try not to think about it because I can't logically wrap my head around what that was, but I will always remember it. I have been waiting to tell this somewhere. Last fall I was in Toronto and walking on College Street to get to this video arcade place. Turns out they were not open yet, so we kept walking to go to another arcade I found on Google Maps that was open but stayed on this particular street. On the way we passed by this older woman, must have been in her 80s. She stood out because she looked borderline homeless, was a smaller woman and had one pant leg slightly up on her leg and these little light red sandal shoes and a scarf loosely draped around her head/neck, no bag. No belongings with her? We continued walking down the street about 10 minutes, and the same-looking woman walked past us in the same direction as the first one, wearing the exact same thing. The shoes and the pant legs stood out immediately. At first I thought it was the same woman but then realized that would be impossible. I was in my 20s and my then boyfriend and I were at his parents' house. Just the two of us, and the family dog. He was opening mail in the dining room and I was rinsing a glass in the kitchen, within sight of him about 15 feet away. We were talking and suddenly came loud footsteps overhead. Stomp, 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 stomp. He froze and I looked at him like WTF. But the look on his face was not confusion or panic, oh no. It was oh shit, now I have to tell her the house is haunted. So then he let me in on the family secret. Some entity, it had a strong masculine energy to me, lived in their attic. BF's mom had tried nailing the crawl space door shut, placing typewriters in front of it, etc. always got reopened. And the dog would refuse to go upstairs unless carried directly into one of the bedrooms. I can't explain it but I do have a good guess. November 17, 2023 at approximately 5:20 am to 5:36 am. I stepped out onto the front porch, it was very dark. I really like to see the stars, it's pretty. I see a triangle, silently pass over the house. It was light up with circular lights on two edges. As it passed over the house, it was bigger and bigger, almost the size of half the house. I was fascinated and then scared so I went back in. There is an Air Force base not more than 60 miles away. The silence was scary. Next thing I know I'm waking up to the morning sun like nothing happened. Except I was laying opposite to what I normally do, head where my feet usually are. I try to play it off as a bad dream. But it felt real, and waking up in a new orientation makes me feel like it wasn't. Edit, a word. I had just rolled over to get comfy in bed after waking up for a moment. Something felt off and weird about my room. It was eerily silent, like all the sound had been muted. When I noticed a light in the corner of my room at first I thought it was a car light. Until I realized it was coming from my bathroom. It was a strange blue light to me, there were no windows or anything that I knew lit up that color in there. I started to get up to investigate. Back then my bed was lofted so I was up 5 feet from the floor. That's when the light source started moving. I was just peering over the edge when what looked to be an orb of brilliant blue light slowly floated into my room. I sat terrified as it floated across the floor. Then stopped. Then floated towards me, it started getting cold and I tried to say something, but it's like the words were being sucked out of me like a dentist's straw. Then I was driving through Casper, Wyoming 3 weeks ago. I needed to meet a friend on my way through for a minute and we decided to meet near Menards in the south end of town. As I am driving up I swear to everything that on the right side of the road I witness a full tree render from the ground up out of nowhere, just like in a video game, right in front of me. It's winter time, so no leaves or anything like that, but I had to stop the truck and gather myself because it was so shocking. Strangest thing I have experienced in a long time. This just happened recently. I was driving home around dusk. Headlights were on but there was still some daylight, enough to see. On the shoulder of the highway, 2 kids were walking. There were no other cars, so I moved over a bit just to be safe. As I passed them, one of them turned her head to look at me. I watched them, a bit creeped out by two kids walking along an empty highway. As I passed them, I glanced at my side view mirror to keep an eye on them. And they were gone. A quick glance over my shoulder showed an empty highway. In a movie, I would have stopped to look. In real life I hit the gas and didn't look back again. My little brother was a douchebag, and he'd frequently take my car without my permission or putting gas into it while denying up and down that he did so. The kicker is he was almost always smoking or drinking, so he could have really put me at risk. Dumbass would put the parking brake on when he parked despite the area I park being near flat, so I always knew when he took it. No one else did this. About 5 years ago, I woke up from a vivid dream of being in agony in my bed. I could feel my consciousness dying bit by bit, a pressure in my head building as it all slipped away. It dragged on for many hours, and when I awoke, I knew something was terribly wrong. I found out hours later that he was brain dead after having a heart attack caused by a cerebral hematoma. Somehow, I had dreamed his final, conscious moments on this earth. When his shell was allowed to die several days later, I went to my car to go out. I had taken it out the day before, yet when I got in the car, the parking brake was on. I saw a vision of him pointing at me and laughing in that obnoxious way the boy from The Simpsons does. Nelson maybe. Ha ha, before disappearing. There is no chance I put the parking brake on, and no one else in my family does this. It may not be scary, but it sure as shit isn't something I can explain. When I was 17, my parents finally let me ride my motorcycle to school. In my country, you can get your driver's license as soon as you have your ID card. One day, on my way home, I made a classic dumb teenager move. A train was coming, and I tried to beat it across the tracks. My tire slipped, I panicked, and the train started blasting the horn. Out of nowhere, this old man appears and literally lifts me and my bike off the tracks just as the train barrels past. It happened so fast, I could barely process it. My knees were shaking like crazy. I turned to thank him, and he was gone. No trace of him anywhere, even though it was a wide open area with no place to hide. Did he sprint away? Seems like he evaporated to thin air, because it literally half a second passed since he lifted me to safety. Almost 14 years passed. Even writing this now gives me goosebumps. Posted this last time this was asked, had a small burnished metal-topped Pier 1 bistro table on my screened porch for years. One morning I noticed 2 toddler-sized handprints and a single footprint that appeared to be etched into the surface, faint chalky color. Scrubbed the crap out of it, and they were still there. I'd never had a kid that small in my house and am 100% sure nobody else would have done it as a prank. Item, picked it up and handled it and neither of us, owner and I, said one word to each other. He got so freaked out he pulled me out. To this day I am not exactly sure what took place. I did seriously talk to the owner quite extensively and still recall some of the things he shared. Very strange. I think telepathy is real. I was visiting Provincetown, Ma, and went into an art gallery that had all sorts of art from Africa. It was a lot of handmade carvings of animals, masks, etc. No one was in the store except my boyfriend and I and the owner. He took me around the store and explained in great detail the carvings, what they meant, the tribe that made them, what ceremonies they were used in, etc. It was super interesting. We talked for like 15 to 20 minutes. Then suddenly my boyfriend grabbed my arm and pulled me out of the store. When we got outside, I told him how rude he was to do that. The man was being so kind in explaining everything to me. He told me the man and I never spoke a word for the entire time we moved from item to item. I asked him what he was talking about. We had a super detailed conversation. He explained about every item in detail I had examined. My boyfriend said that I went from item 2. I had my hat sitting on the dash. My windshield wipers were on as it was raining a bit. I was driving and out of nowhere my hat lifted up, not a whole lot but like it was flicked, almost as if my windshield wiper picked it up. My girlfriend saw it too and was just as puzzled as I was. I don't know what happened but it didn't do it again. It wasn't a bump and it wasn't the vent. Leaving late at night. A building I used to work in was haunted. I could explain the giggling girls in the basement ladies' room as plumbing noises, although I can't explain why you could clearly hear them from outside, almost being able to make out what they were whispering and giggling about, and the noise stopped and went away the moment you opened the bathroom door. Once you opened the door the noise would be gone until some other evening. What I never came up with an explanation for was the menacing creepy old guy that would stand behind my car blocking me from backing out of the parking space. He only ever appeared in the rear view mirror. If I turned around to look at him he would be gone. I originally assumed it was a reflection of the parking lot lights but it didn't matter where in the lot I parked, he would still show up. It got so bad I stopped looking in my mirror before backing up when I was. A few years back I woke up in the middle of the night a few different times and it felt like something was walking on my bed, at the foot of the bed. My wife was sleeping next to me, so it wasn't her. The odd thing is I mentioned it to my wife a few weeks after it happened and she turned white as a ghost and said she had experienced the exact same thing a few times but didn't want to mention it to me because she thought I would think she was crazy. We still can't explain it. It hasn't happened in a really long time but it was an unnerving experience. I was riding through the town I lived in at the time, around 8 p.m. It was the summer so still dark enough to see the surroundings. I saw a bright green flash that engulfed everything around accompanied by a very loud boom and it felt like my truck was T-boned on the driver's side. The truck physically rocked like it got hit. It was over in a second, no physical damage to my truck or anything in the town. The weirdest part was there was a handful of people walking on the sidewalk off my passenger side that I was passing by as this happened and not one person reacted. Nothing happened, they never even looked my way. Maybe 50 yards down the street on the opposite side there was a few more people walking towards my direction, and they appeared to have witnessed nothing either. The whole thing was extremely strange. Not me, but my family. My family and I own a piece of property and land and a cabin deep in the woods. It's remote and quiet and vast and desolate and isolated. There's even a gate that requires a password and lock that only my family and I know. No one else. Not even our friends who go out there with us. It's the perfect setting for a horror movie or murder mystery. Several times, my family has witnessed a slender man-looking entity on the ridge behind the cabin. It was white and faceless and tall. And it didn't walk across the ridge. It glided and shimmered and barely hovered above the ground while still not touching it, and then vanished into the forest. It's a very remote and desolate and isolated area, with no access to it except for us, so it couldn't be kids fucking around. We still have no explanation for it to this day. About 2010. Mom and I driving down a windy but well-trafficked road late at night. We're the only car on the road. Up ahead, about 50 yards, we see a man walking on the side of the road. He's wearing a waist-length coat and has his hands in his pockets. Why isn't he on the sidewalk? Visibility is low and this guy is going to get killed. I slow down as we approach. I unroll the window to tell this man to get on the sidewalk. Just as we get up next to him, he's gone. Just vanished. I was looking directly at him, and in an instant he disappeared. I don't believe in ghosts. I'm sure there is a rational explanation for what we saw, but I can't figure it out. Was at the beach one evening with friends years ago, and we were all drinking and enjoying ourselves. One friend decided to buy mushrooms from some sketchy random guy on the beach who took us under the pier. Middle of this happening, the ground starts shaking a bit and a fucking fully submerged tank drives out of the ocean right beside of us. I freaked the fuck out thinking we are going to war or something. Dude tells us it's normal, and doesn't even worry about it. Shit will forever be ingrained in my mind. Off the couch for maybe an hour, petrified, no one was home so I couldn't call out, I was trapped. I got to thinking in my head if I turned and faced the room again, a ghost would be there to grab me, kill me, whatever my 8-year-old brain thought up. I eventually got brave enough to turn around to see nothing was there, but I can't explain enough the sheer terror I felt staring at the back of the couch thinking something was behind me, and knowing if I turned around, I was surely doomed. And still to this day, I can't explain the houseplant moving like that. As a kid I was at home sick by myself, maybe 8 at the time back before kids could not stay home by themselves. I was laying on the couch watching cartoons and I saw my mother's houseplant kinda rustling / swaying and then suddenly stop. No windows were open, it sat on an entertainment center nowhere near a window. Our air vents were on the floor along the baseboard next to a wall. And even if it was the air vent, there would be a constant breeze on the plant. During this time, and still am to this day, I was heavily invested in the paranormal. Ghosts, cryptids, aliens, I was terrified of them, but I would absorb any media about them. Seeing the plant do that, instantly made me think ghost, and I laid there terrified, absolutely terrified. I turned my body over to just face the back of the couch so I wouldn't see anything else if it transpired. I remember just staring at the back. I've got a couple. When I was little I was playing by the dumpster at my apartment complex and a dog ran up and I swore with all that was within me this dog said hi, my name, so I took this stray dog home immediately exclaiming that I was Dr. Dolittle. The very next morning our complex was full of cops because a little girl had been abducted the night before from the playground dumpster area and was missing. They found I think her bike and shoes in that same dumpster. The second was on a Halloween I was driving to go to the movies on speakerphone with my friend and a massive car accident happened all around me. A drunk driver did a head-on collision and tried to flee the scene. I felt the other cars hit my car, but I had covered my face screaming. Well, my car didn't have a scratch, not a dent. My car was covered in broken glass, it even came in through the windows. I was just sitting there boxed in by 4 cars in a fatality and others severely injured accident with EMS looking at me like it was a miracle. But I had been so bounced around I couldn't figure out how nothing hit my car. My neck and chest were slightly red from the seat belt. I sat there for hours in the scene because the other cars were totaled, and there had been an ejection. But my CD player that had never worked started working all of a sudden playing in loop Go Your Own Way by Fleetwood Mac. I ended up having to get a new radio as it would never play anything other than that song. I still have the CD. Must have been fairly soon before she woke me as well as it was still quite wet when I first looked and by the time I had cleaned her up and checked her it was dry. Only possible explaining I can think of is a bloody gum or tooth or her nose but it seemed like way too much blood for that and there was no blood in or around her mouth or nose. One night maybe 5 or so years ago my missus wakes me up in the middle of the night. One side of her face is covered in blood and there is a small pool of wet blood on her pillow about the size of my hand. It's not massive but it's still quite a bit. I ask her what happened and she says she doesn't know, just woke up like that. I get her into some decent lighting, clean her up and look for the wound. After a good 30 minutes I can't find anything. Not a scratch, not even a spot that she might have caught in her sleep. There is no blood in or around her nose, eyes, ears or mouth. Nothing is wrong with her that would cause that much blood. I check the pillow, the bed, the floor, even look over the walls and ceiling. Only blood I find is this now dry pool about the size of my hand on the pillow. Still have no idea what the hell that was about. It was like the blood come out of nowhere. It break down and can't continue the conversation until we change the subject. In fact, it's probably been 10 years since we've even tried. TLDR, was driving home with GF, got a really bad feeling, turned around and went another way, got home only for my mom to say she pretty much had the exact same feeling at about the exact same time. Edit to add, I realized I didn't say that my GF ended up staying for about an hour to calm her nerves. I made her call me when she got home to know everything went fine. That was very important to me at the time, and kind of feels like I should add that part. I lived in one town and my girlfriend at the time lived in another. I was 19 to 20 and living back at home with my parents, waiting to ship out to basic training on a delayed entry program, and my POS car was constantly breaking down, as was the case here. So, I was hanging out at my GF's house that evening, and she was going to drive me home. Well, technically, I drove, but it was her car. Anyway, we decided to take some back roads to be able to have some more time together. It was around 10 o'clock at night, and just a little foggy, but I wasn't worried about that because I knew those roads very well. Then we get to an intersection where I have to stop first. I do so, and then just as I start going, I slam the brakes on. Something was screaming at me not to go that way. I sat there for a few seconds, and I started shaking, but I was getting ready to keep going when my GF asked me to turn around and go back the main way. I was young, cocky and invincible, of course, so I'm surprised I didn't insist at that point on going ahead, but it was like everything in my body did not want to be on that road at that time. As soon as we started going back the way we came, I felt like a weight that I hadn't even noticed was lifted off of me. I was still shaken by what I had felt and the fact that my GF obviously felt something off as well. We spend the 25 minutes or so from there to my house in complete silence. No talking, she talked constantly, no music, we both put music on any time we went anywhere, even if it was so low we could barely hear it because we were talking, but this time, and I don't even know how it would have happened, because the radio was always on, the radio was turned off completely. We were both, I think, too afraid or embarrassed to say what was going through our heads, and just thinking about it to ourselves. Here's the kicker. As soon as we walked in my front door, my mom was sitting on the couch and immediately cried out, "Oh, thank God," and got up and actually hugged us both. She then said that about a half hour earlier she had all of a sudden gotten this sick feeling in her stomach and was absolutely certain that we were in some kind of serious danger. This was before cell phones were really prevalent, so she had no way of getting in contact with either of us once we left. She said she tried to call GF's house, but the line was busy. We always had to fight with her younger brother and younger sister to talk to each other on the phone, so she had just sat there and waited for the phone to ring to say that something had happened to us. To this day, when either my mom or I brings that up, we both get chills and both start to TLDR, bored French ghosts used our GPS to prank us. We were on holiday in the south of France on the Atlantic coast near Arcachon. Across from our campsite, there was this huge forest, and one day we decided to drive into it because it had paved roads. We figured it'd be full of hikers, cyclists, holiday homes and so on, because this was a major tourist hotspot. But there was nothing, nobody for miles. It was eerily quiet as well, no birds, no animals. What it did have, though, was a collection of seemingly random signs shaped like arrows with numbers on them. At random points, we saw pipes sticking out of the ground, and every now and then, we'd run into an unlocked parking lot with jack pumps in them. Now, I'm not superstitious, but my neck hair was standing up. I asked my so to drive us back to the campsite, and so he turned on the GPS. Okay, no problem, except our global. Huge tear opened in the sky. Stayed for 30 seconds or so. It's not really possible to explain the color other than if red and yellow didn't make orange. But made something else that my brain couldn't process. I've never had visual hallucinations before nor after that, so I can't write it off. Was the one she was buried in. As a kid, around 11 years old, I went on a family trip to El Salvador to visit family after the Civil War was over and it was safe to visit. One of the first stops we did was to visit my maternal grandmother's grave. My mother hadn't been to the site in over 10 years, so a group of 6 of us were scanning the rows of above-ground graves looking for her resting place. Think of the cemetery you see in movies like Interview with a Vampire. While we are scanning for the grave, I see a woman walking alongside us wearing an interesting black and white polka dot dress. I look away for a couple of seconds and she is gone. I walk towards the area she was at and lo and behold I recognize the name on the grave. It was my grandmother's resting place. I figured it's a crazy coincidence until I see a picture on the headstone and realize the lady was my dead grandmother. The polka dot dress. I used to live in this apartment, and at one of the doorways this 4-foot shadow person thing would constantly peek out into the living room, and no one in our family talked about it until we moved out and we all found out we knew it was there but never talked about it for some reason. I wish I lived in it when I was older and iPhones were common, because I'd have recorded the hell out of that thing, but people probs still wouldn't believe me. I'm generally pretty skeptical, but occasionally when I lived in my mum's house I'd hear what sounded like someone coming up the stairs and walking down the hallway. The part that freaks me out a little bit is that when I'd get nervous and call out please stop, it always did. When I heard my own voice, from outside of my house, ask my doggo if they wanted their window closed. He panicked. I panicked. Threw some salt, shut and locked everything, and waited till morning. Something like this happened to me years ago. I was smoking out of my parents' kitchen window in middle of night. It was August and really foggy outside, so I could not see the doghouse 10 meters away. I called my dog name and said what's up, then my dog name was called out from the fog. I threw the cigarette away within millisecond and went to bed. Honestly, I could totally see myself out for a walk on a foggy night smoking a blunt and hearing someone call for their dog and me reflexively repeating it back without thinking, actually I've definitely done this. One time I was walking in my dad's neighborhood in the middle of the day and I heard someone sneeze from inside their house and I yelled bless you. On sheer instinct, and immediately realized how creepy that was and ran away Ilmau. Moral of the story is mimics are just autistic stoners with echolalia, don't worry about it. When I was a kid, I desperately needed a few dollars for something important to me. Being poor, I didn't bring it up with my mom or dad knowing they don't have any to give me. I turned to my grandma who died a few months ago and fervently praying, "Grandma, please find a way to send me $10. Please, please. I love you." Over and over. Nothing happened. I guess I was disappointed Grandma didn't bother producing a tenner. That evening I was reading the mandatory reading from school, something super boring, and wanted to skip to the last page so I can claim I finished it. There it was, between the last page and cover, a old $10. This was a library book I had with me all summer. Thank you, Grandma. Sounds pretty mundane. When I was a kid, I had this CD player. Didn't have any special features, didn't, for example, have a feature wherein it would loop anything. I lay down in bed at night as I always did with a story on. If I fell asleep the CD would end, all would be silent in the morning because CDs don't last 8 hours. So I wake up, and realize the CD is still playing. Even odder, it's not moved, like at all. It's the part where I'd fallen asleep before. It's 8 hours later. To this day I can't explain it.